Have you ever wondered how many C-suite titles there actually are in the world? Well, I did, and I did some research, and I found a whole bunch that I didn't even know existed. Today, we're going to talk about the rainbow of C-suite roles that actually exist. Some companies may only have 3 C-level executives. Other companies may have 17. It depends on the company, the culture, the size of the organization, the industry, the technology, or the service involved. But let's just kind of walk through a couple of these C-suite executive roles that are out there that might be something you've certainly heard of, but you may not have heard of as well. First of all, I'm going to talk about 2 C-suite executive roles that don't even begin with a C. And the first one is president. President is a title that's kind of synonymous with chief executive officer. Over the years, the title president and CEO have evolved differently. In some companies or in some cultures, you'll have a CEO and a president, and they'll be 2 different people. In some companies or cultures, you'll have just the president and CEO be one title. Some companies will have a president, but not a CEO. And some companies will have a CEO, but not a president. At the end of the day, a president is generally the person responsible for a business unit. And if there's only one business unit in a corporation, then that person is either the president and or the CEO. It can be that you are the CEO of a corporation and you have multiple presidents reporting to you, and that president would be the head of a business unit or a business line. Another title that's also not a C-suite title, but is in the C-suite is general manager. And again, general manager is very similar to this title president. It just comes down to kind of a cultural thing where like manufacturing organizations tend to have general managers and they are managing a plant, for example. Whereas presidents tend to be the head of a financial organization or a business that's a line in a organization that's relatively flat, but has 5 or 6 different lines of business. Typically, you won't have multiple CEOs reporting to one another. However, I have seen that be the case. There's a company in France called Safran, where they have CEOs report to CEOs, report to a CEO, and they're called group CEO and division CEO. It's not really the same all over the world. It can change and vary based on company and culture. But generally speaking, CEO, president, general manager, all of these people are at the top of their particular food stack, their food chain. They are the ones that oversee an organization of some size or shape. And 2 other titles, just like these, are also managing partner and executive manager. Managing partner, executive manager, president, general manager, they're all kind of the same thing. Again, they're all basically people that are overseeing their own organization. So let's talk about other C titles that you'll see. And we talked about in the last video that you have the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, you have the Chief Financial Officer, you have the Chief Technology Officer, you have the Chief Operations Officer. What other C-suite titles are there? Very commonly, you will see a company have what's called a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. And this person's responsibility is, as you would imagine, to generate the revenue for the company. In many ways, if you have a COO and their job is to deliver, then you have a CRO as a counterpart to them whose job it is to sell. And that CRO will typically have control over marketing, sales, product management, and other things like that. In addition to a CRO, you might see a CSO, Chief Sales Officer, or a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. And again, these titles explain basically what they are. Someone who is in charge of the sales operations of the company or someone who's in charge of the marketing operations of the company. It's not uncommon to have a VP of sales and a VP of marketing report to a CRO, or you can even have a Chief Sales Officer, a Chief Marketing Officer, and a Chief Revenue Officer, and they may report into one another or be side by side. Another role that's on the revenue side that I've seen is Chief Commercial Officer. And again, commercial officer, revenue officer, they're kind of the same thing. But again, all their responsibility is about generating revenue for the organization. Now, on the operations side of the company, there's a number of C-suite roles, and it's all dependent on, again, the organization or in the industry, right? A very common one that you'll see would be CIO, Chief Information Officer. And this would be for a company that's dealing with a lot of data. By the way, there is also a title called Chief Data Officer, and this would be for companies that are specifically data analytic driven companies, right? And so if you're dealing with a lot of data, you want to have someone who is the head of managing all of the data services and data administration. So Chief Data Officer is a new title that I've seen. Additionally, in terms of infrastructure for the company, you will see sometimes a CHRO, a Chief Human Resources Officer, which is basically the person in charge of human resources. Alternatively, I've also seen the title CAO, which is Chief Administration Officer. And they tend to be born out of like a VP of administration underneath of a CFO and become a CAO. So HR and administration, they're kind of similar. You'll see one or the other most likely, but not both. There's also the Chief Legal Officer. If you're a company that is, for whatever reason, litigious, or your customers or competitors are litigious, it's not uncommon to have a legal officer inside of a large corporation. Chief legal officer is also someone, like if you buy very large things like airplanes, airlines will have a chief legal officer who helps them with really making sure that the contracts and all of the compliance is all handled. By the way, there's also a CCO, Chief Compliance Officer, that you can be, and that's again in organizations where there's a lot of regulatory issues and concerns. There's also the CPO, and the CPO can be one of a couple things: Chief Product Officer, Chief People Officer, which is just another title for CHRO, and Chief Procurement Officer. That would be someone who heads up your supply chain if that's a big deal in your corporation. There's also the CXO, which can be the Chief Experience Officer, and this would be in an organization where there's a lot of R&D and innovation, which, by the way, there's also another CIO, which is Chief Innovation Officer. So you can see how there's like this rainbow and spectrum of titles in the C-suite. And it really, again, it depends on what the organization is and what their goals are and what's important to either the CEO or to the board or to the owners in terms of what areas get the most focus. Many times these C-suite titles are also just VP titles or director titles, or no title at all, like you are just head of procurement, head of marketing, head of sales. It depends, again, very culturally, but understand that like there are a number of ways to get to the C-suite. You don't have to just be a CFO or a CEO or a CTO or even a CMO. Plenty of other ways too. So if you're somebody who's really good at design, really good at product or innovation or R&D, there are paths for you. Even the sales team, if you're a great sales leader, then there are Chief Sales Officer, Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Commercial Officer. So there's all kinds of ways to move to the C-suite beyond just maybe the traditional paths that you've thought about. I've even heard about a new title called Chief Green Officer, CGO. This one was hot off the press from today. And a Chief Green Officer, their job is to make sure that a corporation is in compliance with environmental regulations and policies that the company might set for itself. A number of C-suite roles that are out there. So what C-suite titles did I miss? Tell me in the comments what other C-suite titles you've heard of. I'm really curious about this because I know there's plenty more than what I've just listed here. And so now that we've talked about several of these C-suite titles, let's dive into a few of them. Specifically, let's go over to this video here and talk about what the roles and responsibilities of a CEO actually are. I'll see you in that video.